Hello Renaissance artists. Today I'm going to be teaching you about a drawing technique called the comparative method. Now last week we talked about site size, where we take a drawing and make it exactly the same size on our drawing paper. So we have the image and we're basically just doing it straight across, like when you were learning to write letters. The letter R, you made it on the helper line straight across, same size. Today we're going to be taking a photograph, a black and white photo, and blowing it up larger. You can also take this method and take a larger picture and shrink it down smaller. So this works either way. I'm going to show you how to make it larger because that seems to be more often than not the method that we need to use to make an image appear larger. So I'm going to be demonstrating and talking you through blowing it up. All right, let's jump in. Okay, so I have set my pad of drawing paper up on my easel and I've taped my image that I'm going to be drawing right onto my easel right next to it. Down below here on the ledge of my easel, I have the equipment that I may use. I'm not going to use all of this, certainly not going to use the terracotta pencils today or the white highlight pencil, but I do have some darker colors. I'm going to start out with just a 4B. I've got some 4H, HB I'm going to start out with, and just laying in just the general feel of where my portrait is going to sit on the paper. I have some other tools down here. I've got an eraser, which I may not use very much. This is a pencil sharpener, if you've seen these in the art stores and aren't sure what they do. This is sort of a mechanical draftsman type pencil. And you put the lead down inside here and you twirl it. And then on the inside, there's a metal component and that sharpens the pencil. And then your pencil's sharp and ready to go. So I may just use that just to block in where it's going to go. But I do want to use a little bit darker pencils today. I've got just a black pastel pencil and some other items down here. So that's it for that. And I do have a kneaded eraser that I may use. And this is how I sharpen my other pencils. I'll take and shave the lead back on, or the wood back on my pencils like this. And you can take and twirl it. I'm twirling it in my fingers like this onto the sandpaper. Okay, like that, and then it's sharpened too. I like to do it this way more than the little canister because this I'm a little bit more sensitive with, and I can make a very long sharp point. It'll sharpen it all the way back to the wood, whereas this one only sharpens the point of the pencil. Okay, so that's the difference there with that. And then so I also keep in here my little X-Acto knife in my pencil box. So I'm going to set this off to the side, taking only what I need, setting it on my ledge down here, and I will get going. So just taking my, this mechanical, this is a 4H lead in here, and I'm just deciding that on here, she's only, maybe 2 inches big or 3 inches, whatever. On here, I'm going to make it about this big. So I'm blocking in the general skull shape and about where her eyeline is going to go and her nose line. Now on a very small child, the skull is, here I'll show you. On an adult, we have the skull, I'll bring it a little bit closer. The head is shaped about like such, and the eyeline is about in the middle. On a small child, we have obviously a squattier head, and the eyeline is much lower than in the middle. And then the nose divides that, and the mouth, the nose is in half of what's below the eyeline, and then the mouth is in half of what's below the nose and the chin. So they're divided up like that. On an adult, we have the eyeline about in the middle, the nose is about in the middle of what's below here, and the mouth is about in the middle of what's below here, the chin and the nose. So you have the nose and the mouth. And then in this line segment, the eye is about in the middle of that. And then in this line segment, the eye is about in the middle of that. So that's pretty much the divisions of a face. And the same thing goes with the small child. The eyes are about in the middle of those lines, the nose, and then the mouth. So as I'm working on this child today, I'm just bearing in mind that this is a child's skull, and the temple turns about here, and her eye line is about here. So her cheek and chin come in about this area, and I know that her neck is going to be falling in here. And her arm is sort of reaching. I'm not going to draw her hands, but they would be in this general area. Maybe I'll come back and visit those some other time. But that's about the ballpark of where I'm going to be going with placing these features. All right, so now I'm taking my black pencil here, and I'm going to map out about where this eye is. So I'm starting with the eye, and I want to put this in place first. And I'm going to start with this and call it my truth. And I'm giving it the eye socket shape. Bring it in a little bit more. It's a little too big. And the eye socket comes down like this. And then the eyebrow is up in here. Okay, so that kind of gives me that general feeling of where that's going to sit in this grand scheme of a portrait. And feel free to take all the time you need. This doesn't have to get done right away. You don't have to be fast at this. So there's my one eye. Now I'm going to take that eye and measure over how many other eyes the other one is. I'm just going to take my mechanical pencil for this. So I'm laying this on her eye, and there's the eye. Now there's one eye in the middle, and then the other eye is that far over. So here is my eye. There's the eye in the middle. And then the other eye ends over here. So gauging from that, I can see that according to my eye line that I've drawn here, placing this. I'm looking also too at how much white is showing of her eye. I want to get some value on there right away. I can always erase out those eye shines, the little sparkles in the eye. And there's that eyebrow. Thinking about the socket shape as it comes in. And then the skull makes a contour value in here. So I'll be adding some of that in this area. Just a little bit. You don't need very much. And then the skull has a contour coming up and around for the forehead up here. So like that. All right, now I want to get the eye-nose relationship correct. So feeling that those are in about the right location and relationship to each other, I want to gauge how far down that nose is. So taking this measurement, again, the eye length, how far down is the nose? If I take one eye and I go down, the nose, the bottom of the nose, if I go to the bottom corner of the eye, the distance from the eye down to the nose is the same length. So here's the nose, or the eye. And if I put my thumb where the corner of the eye is, the bottom of the nose is right in here. Okay, so I'm going to come back to my black pencil, and the eye line and nose line and mouth line all have to be exactly parallel. Okay, so here's her nostrils. And I'm drawing a line on the side of her nose to see where it hits her eye. And if I draw straight up from her eye down here, that's the width of her nose. And coming over here, I'm going to do the same thing to this side. If there's the edge of her nose and I shoot it up to her eye, The eye is right here. The edge of her nose is going to be directly under it. Okay, so she fits in that area. So I'm going to give a little bit of a value here, keeping my pencil very light. A little bit of shadow under the ball of the nose. Okay, I'm seeing a little bit of a cast shadow this way. I'm going to pull out a little bit of highlight here because I want to make sure that the eyes appear to be looking in the same direction. One thing about putting these sparkles in the eyes, make sure that you don't make them too big, because then they can look like they have cataracts or something. Pull that out a little bit stronger. Give her a little bit of okay. Okay, so the nose is about in place. All right, now the mouth. Drawing a line straight down from the eyes, where does the mouth live in that spectrum? So the mouth, if I go straight down from the eyes here, the corner of the eye represented the corner of that mouth, and the corner of this side of the mouth straight under the corner of her eye here. Okay, so now how far down is the mouth from the nose? So I'm going to come back to my pencil, taking that eye measurement that I had from the beginning, going under the nose, putting my thumb on the edge of the nose. One eye comes to below her lower lip. So here's my one eye, edge of the nose, and I'll make a point with my pencil there. All right, so that is where the part of her lower lip is going to end, right there. So that means her mouth, if her lip is about there, her mouth has to fit in this area here. And I can erase my little marks here indicating the width of her mouth, because that's all that needs to mark. So indicating the opening of her mouth here, following the same parallel that I have here. And then this one comes up here. And then her lip is right in here. Her top lip is barely indicated. We barely see it. Lips are usually just a darker value. You don't want to draw an outline for them. Just reveal them as they are portrayed as a value shift, a change in value. They're usually a little bit lighter, a little bit darker. So I'm going to come back through here with my kneaded eraser. I'm shaping it into a stubby little point, and I'm going to lift out a shine on that mouth. And then in here, there's that value is too dark, that shading. Okay, so now I erased her lower chin. So I'm going to start to, once I get the interior aspects of her face in place, I'm going to come back through now and start putting in the contour of the outside a little more accurate. So her lip is here. And I want to indicate the outside parameters with a few key points. So here's her chin. Where the eye is in relation to the temple, I think it's a little bit further away than what I have indicated. It's about there. And then I'm looking at the distance, and you can take the time and measure the eye over to the temple where the hair starts. I prefer to kind of gauge that and train your eye to start seeing it without having to go over there and measure. But if you're not sure, say, okay, well, this eye is here. Where does that hairline start? It's a little bit more than an eyeball over, so let's double check. This is how you train your eye. Just guess and then come over and double check. So there's one eye. And so the hair is a little bit, it's about an eye and a half over. So I may bring this over just a little bit more. So that's how you can train your eye to get better, by guessing first, hoping you're within the ballpark, and then going and check. Eventually you'll find that going and checking is kind of annoying. So you want to get better at it. And that's one way you can do that. In our very first lesson, when we were doing the lines and checking angles and so forth, that was training for this. So practice those and practice other things related to that, and you will eventually get faster and better at guessing those distances. Okay, so I've got the temple marks indicating the hair, where that comes. And then I'm just looking to see where her cheeks are, in the distance of each cheek in relation to her mouth. Gauging that. Okay, so now I'm just going to loosely sketch the parameters of her head. I'm thinking about where this temple has a little bit of a turning and goes back, and then the side of her head, her hair, comes down this way. And there's a soft turning where her cheek... So just mapping out the outside extremities of the face and thinking about the roundness of the cheek here. And I'm always looking at the distance of the outside of the face to the features. And I don't want sharp lines where I want the feeling of roundness. So in this case here, where I really want her cheek to feel rounded, I would not want to go through and just do a sharp, crisp edge on it. So just like in working a painting or anything else, always be looking for places where you can soften and loosen an edge. Think about the actual contours of the skull. This is a pudgy little temple piece over here. It comes behind the sharper temple right here. So there's flesh, baby fat flesh, that comes out this way. Then it dips in and comes out. Checking this angle. And her shoulder comes out about in the same area as her mouth right here. And it levels out, it has an angle, but her chin comes in front of this cheek. So I'm just going to put a little bit of a value down here. So I don't want those scratchy lines, so I just kind of take my finger, I'm going to soften this edge, let it escape right into her shoulder. Too many of those scratchy lines and it can look like a 5 o'clock shadow, which we do not want. So her chin begins up here under her lip, and the shadow of her cheek tucks behind this passage right in here. I don't want that to be a really sharp edge where the cheek meets the chin, so I'm going to really soften this. Comes up in like that. And I can sculpt out a little bit more of this shape, a little bit more accurate with my eraser. Okay. So looking at how this passage of her cheek comes down and has this very soft roundness. I really want to keep that in my mind as I'm working on the soft, peachy, soft round. So sometimes just keeping certain words right in the front of your mind help you achieve that effect. Okay, I'm going to put some of her hair in here just to help frame in this passage. This is her shoulder, the sleeve. Kind of comes out that way. So coming back in here and pulling out just a few little darker accents. All right, so her chin is in about this area. And then I'm going around the contour of her face. Her cheek and face are separated by the shadow on her neck. So I'm going to first get in her neck and use this to help define the shape of her jawline over here. And just soften this shadow here a little bit. So taking my kneaded eraser, I'm refining the shape of her chin a little bit in here. And again, softening that edge. I don't want it to have a very sharp, clearly defined line. And this chin bone comes in front of her cheek here. And pull that out a little. And the side of her face comes like this. There's an ear back in here that we don't really see much of because it's under her hair. The hair is casting sort of a shadow in this area. Like that. And sometimes you can get the drawing accurate, but if you don't have the value in place, it'll be hard to tell if it's accurate. So just put a thin passage of value on something if you're not sure, and then you can sort of see better where you're going with it. So the top of her head up here is very level, and the shape of her skull turns, comes down this way. And we have the same thing going back here. So just putting a thin value on this whole area, being aware that it's a little darker right here. This point isn't right there. Continuing on with this value, I want it a little darker here to really show that the forehead turns and curls under. passage of value on her clothes down here, just a little to add some separation. And on her other hand. All right, so I've got some pencil marks here that I really want to erase and work on the contouring on this side of her head. Using the softest, lightest touch. I really want to show the side of her face over here, because if I left it just all a light value, it would look flat. So you can use these blending stumps too if you have these on hand. You can buy a pack of them for pretty cheap. Now, one thing I really like about the kneaded eraser is in areas where I want to take off a thin layer of value, I can flatten it and just do a gentle grazing over an area like that, and it'll remove a layer of value. So if you feel like you got it too dark, or there's a line in there that's too, you just scratched it on too dark or whatever, you can easily lift that off. Like that. And I'm going to darken in some of this too, just to give myself a boundary. There's a rock here or something, so we'll just kind of identify that as that. All right, I am going to take my stump here and just soften out the scratches in her hair, so that I really want to create the illusion of her hair being connected to her face and her head. So by having it be sort of a different scratched texture, it just doesn't seem like it's part of her face, and the anatomy and all that. So I'm going to pull some of this down in a little closer in here. The wind was blowing a little bit, so I'll just suggest a few little wisps. Now with this, I'm going against the grain that I used to lay down all of this shading, because I'm now with this pencil, I'm just suggesting the shape of her hair and how it's falling and the angles and all that. I'm going to lose this whole edge back here to sunshine. It's really getting the feel of light hitting that part of her head. Same thing with this side over here. And again, you can use your kneaded eraser to pull out passages. And you can rework your eraser too if it starts to get a little too much lead in it, or not lead, but graphite. Smoothing over. What I don't want the hair to do is to be distracting. So we need to feel it, but not really observe it closely. So we'll just pull out a few little highlights. I'm going to take my eraser here and pull out sort of a bounced light on the side of her cheek over here. And that really soft. All right, well, that wraps up this drawing lesson on the comparative method, teaching you how to blow up a smaller image into a larger image, and a little bit on just basic drawing techniques. All right, we will see you next week. Have a good week. Thank you. Bye-bye.